Imagine a world where humanity cannot distinguish colors. A world where the sun is a blinding orb of white fire and your own hands look like cold ash. What terrifying consequences would this biological prison lead to? We are used to thinking that we see the world as it truly is, a vibrant tapestry of hues and shades that define our daily existence. But our vision is only a narrow slit in the infinite chaotic spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. We perceive reality through the delicate prism of three types of cones in the crystalline architecture of our retina, which tirelessly paint the chaos of incoming photons into billions of distinct shades. But what if this fundamental variable were removed? What if humanity, as a biological species, remained forever trapped in a cold, unforgiving gray gradient? Welcome to a world where color never existed, a reality where the very concept of red or blue is as incomprehensible as a fourth spatial dimension. In our reality, color is not an aesthetic luxury. It is a critical, high-stakes survival tool forged in the fires of competition. Millions of years of primate evolution were dedicated to one specific goal: learning to distinguish a ripe, life-giving red fruit from the deceptive green foliage, and spotting the subtle predatory stripes of a hunter lurking in the dappled shadows of the prehistoric jungle. If we remove the ability to distinguish wavelengths of light, we don't just lose the beauty of a sunset, we destroy the very logic of our biological development. In a world without color, humans would likely suffer from a condition known as total achromatopsia. This isn't just seeing in black and white, it is a fundamental shift in how the eye handles light. Without the cones to process bright daytime data, our eyes would rely entirely on the rods, the cells meant for night vision. This means that ordinary, direct daylight would become an agonizing, blinding weapon. The sun would not be a source of life, but a terrifying deity of white fire that burns the retinas of anyone brave enough to look upon the world at noon. Every morning would be a tactical retreat into the darkness, and every noon would be a biological catastrophe. Civilization in such a reality would be forced to develop in the shadows. Our cities would not reach for the open sky with glass towers reflecting the azure heavens. Instead, humanity would become a species of the twilight, a subterranean or canopy-dwelling civilization that fears the day. Great metropolises would turn into immense labyrinths of deep, structured shadows, protected by massive, brutalist stone canopies designed to shield the population from the destructive white glare of the sun. The Great Shielding would be the primary architectural feat of our species. Architecture would be dictated not by the beauty of forms or the vibrancy of facades, but by the complex interplay of contrasts, luminance, and physical textures. Every building would be a masterclass in light diffusion. We would learn to distinguish thousands of microscopic shades of gray, each of which would have its own name and precise social or technical meaning. Materials would be valued not for their coloring, but for their albedo, their ability to reflect or absorb the limited light available. Polished, mirror-like obsidian against rough, light-absorbing basalt, smooth silk against the abrasive grain of raw wool. Our world would become tactile, sculptural, and deeply relief-like, focusing on the feel of light rather than its hue. Imagine a city where luxury is defined by the softness of a shadow rather than the brightness of a neon sign. This shift would redefine our industrial and scientific progress in ways we can barely imagine. Our space programs would look like something out of a cold mathematical nightmare. Telescopes wouldn't capture the golden nebulae or the blue marble of Earth. They would only see shifting patterns of light intensity. Navigation in the void would rely on pure mathematics and thermal sensors, as stars would look like identical white sparks against a charcoal sky. Even our industry would change. Chemistry would be the king of sciences, focused on the molecular smell and taste of materials rather than their visual appeal. We would build a world of gray steel and silent shadows, perfectly tuned for survival in the dark, driven by an analytical understanding of the world that lacks any visual warmth. The very concept of beauty and technology would shift toward the precision of sound and the smoothness of surfaces. The biology of the human eye would undergo a radical transformation over the millennia. Since our vision in a monochrome world would be much weaker in terms of high-resolution detail, other senses would inevitably take the evolutionary lead. Hearing and smell would develop to levels we would currently consider supernatural. In the absence of color-coded social cues, we would recognize friends and family not by the color of their eyes or hair, but by the unique rhythmic signature of their breathing or a subtle individual scent profile. Our language would be stripped of all chromatic metaphors, but would be enriched with hundreds of new words describing sonic nuances, atmospheric libations, and the complex textures of surfaces. But the most terrifying drama would unfold in the area of basic survival. In the prehistoric era, the inability to see color would mean a failure to read the environment. A lush forest would look like a chaotic, gray static, hiding predators and poisons in plain sight. Nature would become an invisible minefield. How do you distinguish a lethal poisonous berry from a life-saving edible one if they both appear as identical dark gray spheres against a backdrop of mid-gray leaves? Mortality among ancient humans in such a reality would be exponentially higher, potentially slowing the growth of the global population for tens of thousands of years. This pressure would force an unnatural acceleration in other areas of knowledge. Medicine and chemistry would likely become our first and most vital sciences out of pure necessity. Humanity would be forced to develop sophisticated methods for chemical food analysis and toxicity testing long before we even considered inventing the wheel. Our ancestors wouldn't be hunters, they would be analytical chemists of the wild, surviving by their intellect rather than their sight. Social hierarchy would also find new, darker ways to manifest. In a monochrome world, the ultimate symbol of power and divinity would be the control of brightness and the purity of light. The upper castes would occupy the luminous zones, areas with perfectly diffused, soft, and artificial lighting that is gentle on the sensitive, rod-dominated eyes. Meanwhile, the lower classes would be relegated to the darks, viscous, light-starved industrial sectors where the boundaries of objects are barely discernible and life is lived in a state of perpetual, grainy obscurity. Art in this world would evolve into a hauntingly beautiful symphony of shadows. Painting, as we know it, would not exist. Instead, artists would master the art of the glow, using rare phosphorescent minerals and precise carvings to create works that rely on the depth of the shadow and the intensity of the reflection to tell a story. An artist's value would be measured by their ability to manipulate the absence of light. However, the most chilling aspect of this reality is the psychological void. Modern psychology proves that colors are not just visual data, they are direct triggers for our endocrine system. Red increases the heart rate, blue induces calm, yellow stimulates the production of serotonin. In a world deprived of this palette, the internal life of humanity would be flatter, colder, and potentially much more pragmatic and brutal. The lack of varied visual stimuli could lead to a form of collective sensory deprivation, resulting in either widespread apathy or prisoner's cinema, vivid hallucinations where the mind tries to invent colors that don't exist. People might report seeing ghostly hues in their dreams, creating a mythology of a forbidden spectrum. These visions would be treated as madness or divine intervention, further complicating the psychological landscape of a species starved for visual variety. We would become a species of intense focus and cold logic, stripped of the emotional illusions that color provides to our state of mind. Our wars wouldn't be fought over flags, they would be fought over the ownership of the few remaining sources of soft, stable light. The ultimate turning point in this civilization's history would come with the invention of the first sensors.
When science finally reached the stage of detecting the electromagnetic spectrum beyond human perception, the discovery of color would be the most profound shock in history. Imagine a civilization of blind seers who realize that the universe is actually saturated with a phenomenon they call color, a vibrant, energetic reality that every human who ever lived was physically incapable of seeing. This would not just be a scientific discovery, it would be a spiritual crisis. It would be as if we today discovered that every cubic centimeter of empty space is actually filled with screaming voices and brilliant patterns that we are simply too limited to perceive. Religions would crumble and philosophies would be rewritten as humanity grappled with the realization that they are biological prisoners living in a world of infinite beauty while perceiving only its skeletal gray shadow. They would realize that the very universe they claimed to understand was actually thousands of times more complex